Hello, everybody. Welcome back. This is the sixth episode of Crunch Time Crossover. I am your host, Isaac, back at it again with the sixth episode. Left off in the middle. I think my last episode was just 2 or 3 days short of that James Harden trade going to Brooklyn. So that's definitely been, I think, what's buzzing around the most in the NBA right now. To speak on it just a little bit, they won a couple games with Harden starting off without Kyrie Irving in that rotation. But as soon as they got Kyrie back, they ended up dropping 2 games back to back to Cleveland, which was pretty impressive. Granted that it was their first outing with all 3 of them out on the floor. I think I wasn't surprised to see Kevin Durant and Harden play really well together. I mean, granted, they played with each other in Oklahoma a couple years back when they were young, but those are definitely 2 players that I think are able to really feel a sense of rhythm. And I see both of them playing pretty selfless. And I can definitely say I knew Kyrie Irving going back into it was definitely going to disrupt that, a little bit of rhythm that they had. In my opinion, I think that trade was obviously exciting for basketball, and I think that just really furthered the idea of the Nets season is pretty much finals or bust this year. If they don't make it to the finals, I don't know what else you need. And granted, I think when LeBron went to Miami their first year, they didn't win the finals right away, but these players have that kind of expectation on them for themselves, I want to say, especially with the way they've carried themselves over the past couple years. So I'm looking forward to seeing them figure it out. I definitely don't see them losing any more games back to back, especially to those kind of caliber teams realistically. And I think as soon as they figure it out as far as the rotations and the minutes go, I think, again, easily one of the most offensive deadly teams in the league. I think the one thing they're lacking is some bench depth, but thankfully they have again, I think close to 50 games left for the season. So they'll be able to figure it out as far as picking up some good bench pieces. I know they're lacking in the big man department, and I heard rumors about them potentially picking up JaVale McGee out of Cleveland after he had just signed to Cleveland. So that'll be really interesting to see if they're able to pull off a trade. I think DeAndre Jordan's good at center, but I definitely think that if that's who you rely on all season, it's going to be a rough one down low. On Martin Luther King Jr. Day, they ended up playing Milwaukee and beating Milwaukee, which was definitely one of their best outings, I would say. And that's definitely an Eastern Conference potential matchup for them. So it would be nice to see them actually get to go a good 4 or 5 game series. I think Milwaukee's definitely been picking it up as far as the seasons goes, but still a little underwhelming as far as performances. When you have so much buzz and talk about the Nets and what the Nets are doing and how the Lakers are doing, and you have, back-to-back MVP in Milwaukee and just not a lot of conversation. It is a little interesting that that's just where we're at in Milwaukee right now. They're currently second in the East at 10-6. So I definitely, like I said, still one of the front runners, and the Nets are only in the top 5 at 11-8. But those teams are definitely going to start to separate that gap as the season continues. Speaking on Philly, number 1 in the East at 12-5. I think Joel Embiid's finally having one of those tier separating seasons, in my opinion. I think he's always been in conversation for being one of the best big men in the league, but I kind of think that's where his conversation stopped, was just a good big man. But this season, he's definitely been putting up MVP numbers, and Philly's been playing well. It's hard to criticize players that I like, because I am a fan of Ben Simmons, but ultimately I think he's not their weak part of that offense, but I think he's someone in a position who's going to need to start to figure things out because, when you have Joel Embiid playing the way he's playing, he's going to expect a lot from his teammates. And, as your offensive identity and Ben Simmons, not to say that I need you to score the ball and you need to average 25 a game, but you need to be able to knock down and step in when it comes to big shots and big moments. And he's just not that much of a shooter, so it does seem like he kind of shies away. And realistically, when it comes to late in postseason, Joel Embiid's going to get double-teamed, triple-teamed, all off of picks. even on like low like screen and rolls, so and it doesn't have to be Simmons, but as long as they have someone there to pick up that slack, I definitely think Philly's going to continue to just be a good threat in the East. And I've been liking Boston's play as well. Jaylen Brown the other day broke an NBA record of a total of 33 points in 19 minutes, the most points scored in the actual shot clock era in NBA since it was implemented in 1954. So that's a crazy stat line. Like 33 in 19 minutes, he shot 13 for 20. Like he was getting the ball just about every look down the court in that offense. Like that's unbelievable. And that's, 13 for 20 is good numbers, but I will say as the season's progressed, I've been surprised. I've seen a lot of really good shooting percentages from a lot of high scoring players, I mean, I think that's one of the hardest things to do is to be consistent. But not only to be consistent, but to, it doesn't matter who the competition is at that, but it's able to do it on both sides, and Jaylen Brown, I would say, is one of those prominent two-way players in the league, so I like seeing a player that I would say has more of a defensive identity go out and get 33 like that. It's just good for morale for the team. And again, they have still Jason Tatum over there too, and we can't forget about Big Man Taco. So I'm hyped. I'm hyped. I like seeing Boston play. So I'm definitely continuing to pay attention to them. I've been a couple of teams that have been surprising. New York isn't bad. Just to put it out there, like New York's playing good. They're playing good basketball, and I think that's good for the league. I think the Knicks being a part of the conversation, especially when it's not about being the worst team in the league, is just good for basketball. That guard they have, Emmanuel Quickly, man, that kid can play ball at the guard position. I don't remember. Oh, it was on Twitter. One of the Twitter accounts I follow, Wab Perez, man, just crazy cat, was talking about, he put a little compilation of all of Emmanuel Quickly's floaters over the past season. And man, I think as a point guard, that is one of the number one go-to buckets you need is a good floater game. That's almost a guaranteed bucket. If you can get the ball anywhere on the inside and just get it over every defender there, you're a problem once you get in there, and if you start making it enough, that always warrants a double team and a triple team. And I don't know how much talent in New York to kick it out to, but I mean, they're still winning games. So I'm just excited. I'm glad that the Knicks aren't a laughingstock. It's unfortunate that, the last teams in the East right now, the Pistons sitting at 3-13, the Wizards still have not put it together. I don't know what they're doing. I think Bradley Beal's got to get out of there. I was speaking to Anthony off recording, and he said, Bradley Beal has the potential to sign and make a lot of money in his career, but just not a good career. Just wasted talent. It just feels like wasted talent, and it's unfortunate. Because I think Bradley Beal on any good, I don't know if it's coaching or if it's the people around him, but I think if he was put on a team that he realized he needed a change around for and maybe figure out some of his game, they would win a lot of games. I mean, I would imagine him going to a team and it would be the same thing as like a Damian and a CJ, just like two high scoring backcourt kind of guards. Still, CJ being undersized, hell of a defender in my opinion, especially for not being very big. He makes up with it on that offensive end for sure. And, you don't necessarily always have to be big to really make an impact on the court. And that's just, I'm a fan of CJ, but for Bradley Beal, I just definitely think if I'm in the East and I'm seeing the direction of this, and I'm in at least contention, I think that was either, I don't know how the trade would work for him, but because I don't know what the Wizards would want in return, but he's got to get out of there, or he's got to get something moved around. They got to get another piece. And then just to close off the Eastern Conference, Miami 6-10, they were just in the finals, and I think they've been, I would say, one of the more underwhelming teams of the league as well too. I know Tyler Hero's been out a couple games. Bam had a monster game a couple nights ago, put up 41. I like watching. In my opinion, I'm a big advocate for having a good big man, And I think Bam over the next couple of years is definitely going to continue to be in the top 5 center position or power forward position or whatever they choose to play him at. He's just that good. And that 41-point game, I believe they lost, but man, he was just handling the ball, still passing the ball. Didn't put up too many rebounds that game, but still just definitely making his mark on both sides of the ball. So looking forward to that. I like I think the Nets is just the Nets are going to continue to be a point of conversation all over the league. You know, they're going to continue to be scrutinized. They have high expectations. So it'll be, in my opinion, it'll be fun to see them finally get it figured out. Hopefully they just do it before it's too many games in the season. You know, they're already at double-digit wins, so I'm sure they're going to continue to spread that lead out. But again, the East is looking at least a little bit better as far as the competition goes, and I think that's just overall definitely good for basketball. Moving over to the Western Conference, both the Clippers and the Lakers are tied at number 1 at 13-4. I want to say I was looking at Bleacher Report's top 10 rankings, and they actually had the Clippers ranked. They actually had the Clippers and Utah ranked over the Lakers. Clippers at 1, Utah at 2, with the Lakers at 3, which is a little surprising. You know, the Jazz are also 3rd in the West at 12-4, so they're definitely up there. I know they've won 8 games back to back, and I know Donovan Mitchell just reached a milestone of the fastest to get to 600 points at his age. So, you know, he's going to be good. The Shaq comment is something that I think has been definitely stirring up the NBA, you know, and I know Kevin Durant has spoken on it a little bit on their opinions, as well as LeBron James, you know, and it's, I mean, I can't speak on it when it comes to being a champion, you know, but I think there's a lot of truth to it, and I think there's always a better way to say things, in my opinion. You know, I think there's always better ways to get your point across. But I know that I think Shaq did it to try to maybe light a fire under Donovan. You know, I think the way he left the bubble last year was off of a game winner. You know what I mean? Like they went 7 games, you know, and then Denver had to go another 7 games right after that. That very well could have been Utah, you know? So I think Shaq's doing it to be honest, and I agree with him, you know, and I think obviously maybe it wasn't handled the right way. Obviously when anything's on live television, it's weird, you know, responses are always going to be weird. But again, I don't think Shaq's doing it to vilify or try to split people in between. I think he's just trying to make his point known that like you have to be that type of player in the league. Like it doesn't matter what's around you. Like you have to be that kind of guy. And I think Donovan will get there. Again, I imagine in my head the way I see just big and little play, you know, if I saw Donovan Mitchell and Joel Embiid on a team, you know, that's a guard big man combo that I think both would benefit from. You know, when you have high scoring guards, I mean, I think any big man goes well with a high scoring team or with a team that has just a really high shooting percentage. And Donovan definitely shoots the ball pretty lights out. 4th in the West is Portland 2 at 9-6. I know I had spoken on them a little earlier, but CJ did have a hairline fracture in his foot, so he is going to be missing some time. So it'll be interesting to see how they adjust to CJ or being CJ-less for the next couple weeks. But Portland's going to continue to play well. They're going to, again, one of the more, in my opinion, one of the more fun offenses to watch just with the way they move the ball. I really do think Dennis Jones was a good pickup, you know, and I think he's probably going to be the one to step into that starting position. And I think that actually helps Dame a lot because I think having a kind of playmaking, a guard that wants to run the floor helps in transition a lot. And he's, you know, that's the kind of guy you want to throw lobs to in every pick and roll situation you have. So I'll be looking for the Trailblazers to play well. Nuggets are sitting at 5th. The Grizzlies are surprisingly 6th in the West right now. They played a couple games less than the rest of them than the majority of the West at 7-6. So I don't know how long they're going to be able to hold on to that 6th seed. Phoenix is right below them at 7. And then you have seeds, well, technically from 6 through 10, you're at 7, 8, and 8 wins all the way through with San Antonio, Dallas, and Golden State. So again, those are just going to switch as the weeks pass. I'm more curious where things are going to be sometime around March. They've already been discussing about a potential All-Star game happening. And I think the All-Star game is usually a good gauge for any season to see where teams are. By that point, there's teams that have already separated themselves from being, at least winners of their division, or at least a top 4, top 5 team in their respective conference. So I'm looking forward to an All-Star game if they have it. I mean, I'm just a basketball fan, so the more I see, the more I'm into. So I hope they're able to figure that out. There's been already a total, just in the month of January alone, they've had a total of 21 postponed games due to COVID, which is as to be expected. I know the last report on the 20th of January, they had about 11 positive tests, and with 16 the following week before. So, they're going to do their best with it. Again, they have a lot to worry about, but I think something they're going to have to take into consideration is if these all-star players, if they were to do an all-star game, is where their teams are at as far as like COVID protocols too. Because if there's teams that are not making protocols, they're going to have replacements. And that, I feel like at that point, it may be not worth the hassle. So, but again, I'm always down for an all-star game. That's usually the best time of year. And I think them switching over to having like a draft is just always good for basketball, because it just puts together teams that you would never really see. I think for Houston, which is really interesting, I like Victor Oladipo just in general in Houston. Unfortunately, I'm not sure if they're going to make the Rockets. I think looking at Oladipo's talents, I think Oladipo was good enough to be to lead a team to the playoffs in the East, but I don't know if he can do that in the West. And I know John Wall and DeMarcus Cousins, and granted, DeMarcus Cousins had a monster game last week, almost putting up 25. I think it was like 25 and 16, like prime time boogie. But there's just, again, this West is just a gauntlet, and they're still 2 games back, so they can definitely climb into it if a couple teams drop. It really depends on late season and scheduling is always huge in my opinion. And I think there's a new element of games getting postponed and not being able to play right away that definitely is going to start to take a toll on a lot of people. Maybe not take a toll specifically, but to really change how you approach games, especially if you're getting warmed up for a certain matchup and now you don't see them for another week, so it's a little interesting. Again, this is a new time in basketball with COVID going on, so we'll see how it plays out. I'm just going to go over the top 10 rankings per Bleacher Report. I like to disagree with a lot of these. I always disagree with ESPN sometimes just because some of the things that ESPN says is almost outlandish. But I think Bleacher Report will always have something that's agreeable with to the most part. I mean, I think ESPN's always accurate too, but there's just some things that are just absurd. But with these top 10 rankings that came out, I'm agreeing with them. For 1 through 5, like I had already mentioned, they have the Clippers ranked at 1. I think there's a lot of teams that don't recognize the Clippers as the number 1 team in the West or overall. Like, granted, they're number 1 in the West right now, and that's what their stats say, and that's how they're playing. But I think if you ask the majority of the league, I think there's going to be very few people that would recognize them being like, yes, they are the number 1 team. Same thing with Utah beating LA. It's just, I'm riding LA going back to back, if I'm being honest. Like, I don't see that changing. I see the only thing that I think would really have to get my opinion changed is how Brooklyn plays. Because I think Brooklyn is going to be, if they get a couple additions, at least get someone a little bit more time on the bench to get rotated out, it's still Kevin Durant, James Harden, and Kyrie Irving. Like, that's one of the nastiest combos to ever touch for in the same uniform, not in an all-star game. And it was the same conversation when we were talking Clay, Steph, and Kevin Durant, just a different variation. So that was where the Lakers were at 3, Philly sitting at 4, and then Brooklyn is 5, and again, Brooklyn still dropped a couple games, but that's not going to happen very often. I think they're going to be Philly, Brooklyn, and Milwaukee are going to be those 3-4 teams with Boston in the mix. And then 6 through 10 was, speaking of, Milwaukee at 6, Boston was at 7. They had Denver sitting at the 8th seed. The Pacers sitting at 9. The Pacers are actually doing pretty well. Domantas Sabonis might be up there for a most improved. They're at 10-7 in the East right now in the 4th seed. So pretty good basketball. I think, and prayers up to Karis LeVert that they found that mass. But if Karis LeVert was healthy on that team, they'd be really good, like really, really good. And I think that was really hard for Brooklyn to let go of. But I mean, if in return you're getting James Harden, I think I'm gonna let that man go. And then Phoenix was closing out at the 10th seed. And just honorable mention for Portland at 11. But again, with CJ missing time, that's going to be really tough for them to maybe climb back into it. But that was most of the basketball I had for today. I've been tentatively looking at everything. I think just with COVID going on, it's going to be really interesting. But I think something really drastic would have to happen in order for them to postpone the season. So I don't see that happening. It's just with all these games getting postponed, it's just pushing that time of the end of the season back. So I'm sure that league may have some sort of limit to games before they decide to really start to shake things up. But yeah, some good basketball. I'll be looking forward to it. And then again, hopefully looking forward to an all-star game. And I just want to close this out today, with like every episode, just some positivity, just a couple things, some things that are important to me, and, something that I just always try to remind myself when I need it. But, one of the first things I want to do today is, I celebrate being alive today and every day. It's huge. Like I'm very lucky that I got to wake up today, and I'm blessed that I get to do it tomorrow, hopefully, honestly. So I think you should too. You should celebrate, not only just celebrating yourself, but just realizing that there are other people around you that are just as lucky as you to do the same thing. So yeah, definitely a good day to celebrate life today. Another one that I'm sitting with always, is I know I'm not perfect, and I'm okay with that. That's not a goal of mine in this life, or at least where I've come to, it's just, I don't need to be perfect, but I just need to be more me. I think I'm starting to try to get in touch with what I would refer to as like the more authentic version of myself, like a more in tune version of me, because I think you doing that for yourself lets you really connect with other people, and gets you to really, granted maybe that doesn't mean a lot to a lot of people, but for me, small interactions that are good and kind mean a lot. Just little things sometimes are enough to be like, oh yeah, that changed how I was feeling today, So yeah, I'm not perfect, and I'm okay with it. And I'm trying to always be okay with that. Another good one for you to think about, for you to, really nail into your head, is the only approval you need is your own. You got to be good with what you're doing, and I think you shouldn't let other people dictate your feelings and your thoughts and actions, but I think if you have feelings about it, you should address them, but ultimately you need to be you for yourself, and you don't need to shape yourself for somebody else. You need to, I think the way I imagine it is like sharpening a knife, very dangerous, and you can cut yourself at all time, but the sharper your knife is, the easier it is to cut things with. It's a tool, and I think your mind is a tool. I think your body's a tool as well. So just really kind of like getting that down into your head of, you're here for yourself. You don't need to do anything for anybody else, is I think something that I had a very mixed view of for a while, but I'm glad I'm coming around to that. And then, I think the last one is something that I want to really work on, that I've been trying my best, and it's hard sometimes, but hearing about it and thinking about it is motivation. But saying it and then acting on it, but dedicating yourself to self-improvement. That's a dedication. You have to dedicate yourself to getting better at things. You have to put time into something to see progress. I think we live in a world where there's such a necessity for a quick reward, like a quick, like, that feels great right away. If I do this, I know this will come in return, and that's not necessarily bad, but when it comes to growing and maturing, things take time, and you need to put in that kind of time and work for you to be able to enjoy that sometimes. I think everything is important when it comes to getting to another step in life. So just enjoy all those aspects of it, especially if it's enjoying those, especially if it's making you better. But that was my positivity for today. I'm very, very glad to be back for episode 6. I would just like to shout out Primo's getting big, ladies and gentlemen. Primo Media is making some movements. I would love it if everyone checked out the other episodes that are out. We've had the first episode of Way Off the Mark drop, episode 1 with my friend David True and Queen Celine dropping. Go give that a listen. Real Talk with Gigi Licious and Aubriana just on their 3rd episode, making some movement. Go give that a listen. We got some girls with some good insight. And lastly, keeping it sports related, Fiends of Football with Ruben, holding it down, getting you guys some really good interviews with some real, some real good conversation. I think that's something that is really important, is some good dialogue, and I think Primo's put together a pretty impressive group to do that and get you content that you guys are looking for. So I would love it if you guys gave them a shout, gave them a listen. I know they're looking forward to it, as we all are. I hope everyone is good this week. Have a blessed week. Take care of yourself. This rain right now is crazy. So stay dry. Stay super dry. And I'll hear you guys next week. Peace.